A billionaire's wheelchair snaps in half in the middle of a crowded plaza. Hundreds of people pull out their phones to record his humiliation. But one woman drops everything and rushes to help. And what she does next will leave you speechless. Here's the twist that changes everything. She's not just any stranger. She's carrying a secret that makes this moment of kindness even more powerful than anyone could imagine. What happens when two completely different worlds collide over a broken wheel? The answer will restore your faith in humanity and make you question everything you thought you knew about the people around you. The metallic crack sliced through the busy plaza like a knife. Vincent Torres felt his custom wheelchair buckle beneath him. 1 second he was rolling through the crowded square, heading to his afternoon meeting. The next second, the $20,000 chair, built with titanium and precision engineering, split right down the middle. His body lurched forward. His briefcase slid toward the pavement. The wheelchair groaned under the strain, ready to dump him face first onto the concrete. But what happened next was worse than the fall itself. Nobody moved. A perfect circle formed around him as dozens of people stopped dead in their tracks. Instead of helping, they did what people do these days. They reached for their phones. "Holy crap, you getting this?" someone whispered. Cameras pointed at him from every direction. A teenager was already going live on social media. An older man held his phone sideways, recording like this was some kind of entertainment. Vincent's face burned with shame. Here he was, the guy who'd built 3 companies from scratch, who'd given millions to charity, who'd spoken at conferences around the world, reduced to a sideshow for people's feeds. The chair made another sickening crack. He had maybe 5 seconds before total collapse. That's when she appeared. A woman in work clothes dropped her shopping bags without thinking twice. Groceries scattered everywhere, oranges rolling across the walkway, her coffee cup smashing on the ground. She didn't even glance at the mess. While everyone else stood there filming, she dove forward and caught his wheelchair with both hands just as it gave way completely. "I've got you," she said, her voice calm and sure. Vincent looked up at her face. She wasn't dressed like someone who belonged in this upscale part of town. Her jeans had paint stains. Her boots were scuffed from real work. But there was something in her eyes, a quiet strength that reminded him of the toughest CEOs he'd ever met. The crowd kept gawking. Some looked actually disappointed that he didn't hit the ground. Others were already posting their videos with captions he didn't want to imagine. "Can you stay still for just a minute?" she asked Vincent, then turned to face the crowd of phone-wielding vultures. "Show's over, folks. Give the man some space." She didn't yell or get nasty about it, but something in her tone made people actually listen. The circle started breaking up, though plenty kept their cameras rolling from a distance. She knelt down next to the busted wheelchair, pulling a small tool from her back pocket. "This is totally fixable," she said, studying the broken joint where the frame had snapped. The bolt sheared off, probably metal fatigue from city vibrations. "But I can get you moving again." Have you ever seen people watch but do nothing? What would you have done? Vincent stared at this complete stranger who'd literally caught him when he was falling. In his world of business deals and board meetings, everyone wanted something. Every favor came with strings attached. Every act of kindness had an angle. But this woman? She just helped. No questions. No cameras documenting her good deed. No agenda he could figure out. "Why?" he finally managed to ask. She looked up from examining the wheelchair, genuinely confused. "Why what? Why help me? Everyone else just acted like jerks with phones?" She shrugged, already working on the repair. "My dad always said we're all just trying to get through this life in one piece. Today, your will broke. Tomorrow maybe I'll need someone to catch me when I fall." Those simple words hit him harder than any business lesson he'd ever learned. As she worked, Vincent realized he was witnessing something rare in his world: kindness without conditions. She worked on his wheelchair like a master mechanic. Her multi-tool moved with precision Vincent had only seen in his own engineers. She didn't fumble or hesitate. Every motion was deliberate, confident. Within minutes, she'd identified the problem, removed the sheared bolt, and was already fashioning a temporary fix from what looked like spare parts in her toolkit. "You carry replacement bolts in your pocket?" Vincent asked, genuinely amazed. "You learn to be prepared when you fix things for a living," she replied, not looking up from her work. "This isn't my first broken wheel. Just usually they're on shopping carts or baby strollers." What struck him wasn't just her skill, it was her attitude. She wasn't treating him like a fragile victim who needed to be handled with kid gloves. She wasn't speaking in that overly gentle voice people used around him sometimes. She was just fixing his chair like it was any other repair job. No pity. No awkward sympathy. Just problem solving. "There," she said, tightening the final connection. "That should hold until you can get it properly serviced. The temporary bolt is actually stronger than the original. Sometimes the cheap fixes work better than the expensive ones." She stood up and brushed off her knees. Vincent tested the wheel. It rolled smooth as silk. Better than it had in months, actually. "That's incredible," he said. "How did you know how to fix it?" She packed up her multi-tool. "I rebuild engines in my spare time. Wheelchair mechanics aren't that different from transmission work, just smaller parts." Vincent felt something shift in his chest. When was the last time someone had looked at his disability and seen just another problem to solve? Not a tragedy, not an inspiration, not a charity case, just broken machinery that needed fixing. "I owe you," he said. She was already gathering up her scattered groceries. "You don't owe me anything. Just pay it forward when you get the chance." As she started to walk away, Vincent realized he didn't even know her name. This stranger had restored not just his mobility, but something deeper, his dignity. In a world where people either stared with pity or turned away in discomfort, she'd simply seen a person who needed help and provided it. "Wait," he called out. "At least let me know who you are." She paused and looked back with a small smile. "I'm nobody special. Just someone who believes broken things can always be fixed." As Vincent rolled away on his perfectly functioning chair, one thought echoed in his mind. Kindness without recognition can change lives. This woman had given him something priceless. Respect instead of pity. Action instead of empty sympathy. He had no idea their paths would cross again in ways that would change everything. The crowd melted away like it had never been there at all. The plaza returned to its usual rhythm. Tourists snapping photos, street vendors calling out their wares, the endless flow of city life. But Vincent sat still in his perfectly repaired wheelchair, watching the woman who'd saved him collect the last of her scattered groceries. Something had shifted in that moment when she looked at his broken chair and simply fixed it. Not as a hero rescuing a victim. Not as a good person doing charity work. Just as one human being helping another human being who needed it. He couldn't remember the last time someone had treated him that way. "Can I ask you something?" Vincent said before she could disappear into the crowd forever. She straightened up, holding her dented coffee cup. "Sure. Why did you help me?" The question seemed to catch her off guard. She tilted her head like she was trying to figure out if he was serious. "Because you needed it," she said finally, as if the answer was so obvious she couldn't understand why he'd even ask. "That's it. What else would there be?" Vincent felt something crack open in his chest, not the painful kind of breaking, but the kind that lets light in where there used to be darkness. For years, every interaction had felt calculated. People helped him because they wanted something from him, or because it made them feel good about themselves, or because they thought he was inspirational, or because they pitied him. But this woman, she'd helped him for the simplest reason in the world. Because he needed help. "Most people don't think like that," he said quietly. "Maybe you've been around the wrong people." She said it without judgment, like she was stating a fact about the weather. But those words hit him harder than any business criticism he'd ever received. When was the last time someone had seen past his disability, past his wealth, past everything else, and just seen him? For the first time and longer than he could remember, Vincent felt truly visible. Not as the inspirational disabled guy. Not as the rich businessman. Not as someone to be pitied or admired or used. Just as a person who'd been stuck and needed someone else to unstuck him. The feeling was overwhelming. His throat tightened. His eyes stung. He realized he was on the verge of tears in the middle of a busy plaza, and he didn't even care. "You okay?" she asked, and there was genuine concern in her voice. "Yeah," he managed. "It's just most people either stare at me like I'm broken, or they ignore me completely, or they treat me like I'm some kind of saint just for existing. You're the first person in a long time who's looked at me and just seen a guy with a busted wheelchair." She considered this, her expression thoughtful. "Maybe that says more about the people in your life than it does about me. Would you still help if you knew there was nothing in it for you?" As Vincent watched this stranger, who'd given him something priceless without asking for anything in return, he made a decision that would surprise them both. "I know this might sound weird," he said, "but would you let me show you something? Where I live, I mean. It's not far from here." She raised an eyebrow. "That's definitely the kind of thing my mother warned me about. I promise I'm not a serial killer." That's exactly what a serial killer would say. But despite her words, Vincent caught something in her expression. Curiosity, maybe. Or the same sense he had that this random encounter was turning into something neither of them had expected. "Look," Vincent said, "I know how this sounds. Random guy in a wheelchair invites stranger to his place. But I swear I'm harmless, and I think you'd find where I live interesting." She studied his face like she was trying to solve a puzzle. "Interesting how?" "It's hard to explain. It's just not what you'd expect from someone who can afford a $20,000 wheelchair." Vincent blinked. "How did you know how much it cost?" "I looked up the model while I was fixing it. Custom titanium frame, electromagnetic braking system. That kind of engineering doesn't come cheap." She shifted the grocery bag to her other arm. "Which makes me wonder what you're really doing in this neighborhood." Smart. She was paying attention to details most people missed. Vincent found himself even more intrigued. "That's part of what I'd like to show you," he said. "If you're willing to take a chance on a stranger. My name's Riley, by the way. Riley Chun. And you are?" Vincent hesitated for just a moment. "Grant," he said. It wasn't technically a lie. Grant was his middle name. Grant Torres. "Well, Grant Torres with the expensive wheelchair and the mysterious living situation. You've got me curious. But if this turns out to be some elaborate setup, I know how to defend myself." "Fair enough." They made their way through the city streets, an unlikely pair. The woman in paint-stained work clothes and the man in the high-tech wheelchair. Their conversation came in fits and starts, comfortable silences mixed with curious questions. "So what do you do?" Riley asked as they waited for a light to change. "I'm between jobs right now," Vincent said, which was another technical truth. "You said you rebuild engines?" "Among other things. I fix whatever needs fixing. Cars, motorcycles, appliances, furniture. If it's broken, I can usually figure out how to make it work again." That's a useful skill. More useful than whatever most people do sitting behind desks all day. Vincent smiled. If only she knew. As they traveled deeper into a neighborhood that definitely didn't look like it housed expensive wheelchairs, Riley's skepticism grew more obvious. The buildings got older, the streets narrower. This wasn't where someone with money lived. "You sure you're taking me the right way?" she asked. "Trust me," Vincent said, knowing that what she was about to see would change everything. "We're almost there." Riley's doubt grew stronger with every block. The neighborhood around them was all run-down apartment buildings, corner bodegas, and cracked sidewalks. Not exactly where she'd expect to find someone who owned precision-engineered mobility equipment. "This is it," Vincent said, stopping in front of a building that looked like it hadn't been updated since the 1970s. Brick facade stained with decades of city grime. fire escapes that had seen better days, windows that needed washing and frames that needed paint. Riley looked from the building to Vincent and back again. "You live here?" "I know it doesn't look like much from the outside. It looks like a place that should be condemned, not lived in." Vincent smiled. Sometimes the best things are hidden in plain sight. He rolled up to what looked like a service entrance on the side of the building. Instead of using a key, he pressed his palm against what Riley had assumed was just a metal plate next to the door. A soft beep sounded, and the heavy door clicked open. "Fancy lock for a rundown building," Riley observed. "Like I said, not everything is what it seems." The lobby inside was clean, but unremarkable. Basic tiles, fluorescent lighting, the kind of space that said budget renovation. An elevator at the far end looked like it had been installed sometime in the 1980s. Vincent hit the call button. When the doors opened, Riley expected to see the same institutional interior. Instead, she found herself looking at polished brass walls, soft lighting, and what appeared to be a small security camera in the corner. "What the hell?" she said. "Going up," Vincent said, rolling into the elevator. Riley hesitated for just a moment, then followed. Vincent pressed a button that wasn't numbered, just a small brass circle near the top of the panel. The elevator began to rise, and kept rising. Too long for a normal apartment building. "How many floors does this place have?" Riley asked. "From the outside?" "4. From the inside?" "More than you'd think." The elevator stopped with barely a whisper. When the doors opened, Riley's world turned upside down. She was looking at a penthouse that belonged in a magazine. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the entire city skyline. The furniture was modern but comfortable, not the cold, expensive kind that nobody actually used, but pieces that were clearly high quality and chosen by someone with taste. Art on the walls that looked original and expensive. A kitchen that belonged in a restaurant. Riley stood frozen in the elevator doorway, trying to process what she was seeing. "You coming in?" Vincent asked, already rolling into the space like he owned it. Because she was starting to realize he probably did. "What is this place?" she whispered. "Home," Vincent said simply. "Can I get you something to drink?" "Water, coffee, something stronger." Riley finally stepped out of the elevator, but she felt like she was moving through a dream. The contrast between the building's exterior and this space was so extreme it made her dizzy. She walked to the windows and looked out at a view that probably cost more per month than she made in a year. "I don't understand," she said. "The building outside is falling apart. This is..." She gestured helplessly at the luxury surrounding them. "I bought the whole building a few years ago. Left the outside exactly as it was." Most people never look past appearances. Riley turned to face him. Vincent was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Nervous, hopeful, maybe a little scared. Imagine stepping into a stranger's home only to find this. "What would you think?" "Who are you?" she asked quietly. "That's complicated. Try me." Vincent was quiet for a long moment, looking out at the city below them. When he spoke again, his voice was different, heavier, like he was carrying weight she couldn't see. "What if I told you that everything you think you know about me is wrong? That I'm not who I said I was? And that I've been living a lie for reasons that seemed important at the time, but now feel empty?" Riley's heart started beating faster. She was standing in a stranger's penthouse, and that stranger was about to tell her something that would change everything. "I'd say you better start explaining," she said. Vincent wheeled himself to the windows and stared out at the city for a long moment before speaking. "My real name isn't Grant Torres," he said quietly. "It's Grant Holloway." Riley felt the blood drain from her face. Even she, someone who didn't follow celebrity news or business headlines, knew that name. Grant Holloway, the tech billionaire who'd vanished from public life 3 years ago. The man everyone assumed had either died or disappeared completely. "You're him," she whispered. "The missing billionaire." "Not missing. Just hiding." "From what?" Grant turned his wheelchair to face her, And for the first time since they'd met, she saw real pain in his eyes. From everyone who wanted something from me. From business partners who smiled to my face while planning to stab me in the back. From friends who turned out to be users. From family members who saw dollar signs instead of a person. His voice grew bitter. From a world where every single interaction was calculated, where every act of kindness came with strings attached. Riley sank into one of his expensive chairs, trying to process what she was hearing. 3 years ago, my business partner, my best friend since college, tried to have me declared mentally incompetent so he could take control of my company. Said my disability made me unfit to make business decisions. The betrayal nearly destroyed me. So you just disappeared? I sold everything quietly, set up trusts, bought this place under a fake name. I wanted to see what it felt like to live in a world where nobody knew who I was or what I was worth. Where people would treat me as just Grant, not as Grant Holloway the billionaire. Riley was starting to understand. That's why you were in that neighborhood today. You were living like a regular person. Trying to. But even then, most people either ignored me or treated me like a charity case. You were the first person in 3 years who looked at me and just saw someone who needed help. The weight of what had happened between them settled over Riley like a blanket. She'd helped one of the richest men in the world fix his wheelchair, and she'd done it without knowing who he was, without wanting anything from him. Today, Grant continued, when you caught my chair, when you fixed it without asking questions, when you treated me like any other person who needed help, it was the first real human connection I've had since I've been hiding. Riley stared at him, overwhelmed. Why are you telling me this? Because you gave me something I thought I'd never find again. Genuine kindness. No agenda, no expectations, no strings attached. Just one person helping another person because it was the right thing to do. Wealth can buy many things, but not sincerity. I've spent billions on business deals, charity donations, investments, Grant said. But I couldn't buy what you gave me today. And now I don't know what to do with that. Riley looked around the penthouse, then back at the man who'd just turned her entire afternoon upside down. Well, she said finally, I guess we start there. Riley's phone started buzzing at 6 a.m. First it was her neighbor texting. Girl, are you seeing the news right now? Then her sister calling. Riley, what the hell is happening? By the time Riley stumbled to her laptop with her morning coffee, the internet had exploded. The headline on every major news site was the same. Missing billionaire spotted alive. And there, plastered across every screen, was a crystal-clear photo of her catching Grant's wheelchair in the plaza yesterday. Someone in that crowd hadn't just been recording for social media. They'd been documenting what would become the biggest story of the year. The photo showed her mid-dive, arms outstretched, catching Grant just as his chair collapsed. Her face was perfectly visible, clear as day. No hiding behind sunglasses or turned away from the camera. Within hours, she wasn't just Riley Chin anymore. She was the mystery woman who saved Grant Holloway. Her name was trending on Twitter. Her photo was being shared millions of times. News vans were already parked outside her apartment building. By noon, she couldn't leave her place without reporters shoving microphones in her face. Riley, how long have you known Mr. Holloway? Are you two in a relationship? Did you know who he was when you helped him? What did he offer you in return for your silence? That last question made her blood boil. The assumption that her kindness must have had a price tag attached. She pushed through the crowd without answering, but the cameras followed her everywhere. To the grocery store, to her job site, even to the coffee shop where she'd grabbed lunch for the past 2 years, and where the barista now looked at her like she was a celebrity instead of just Riley, who ordered the same thing every day. Her phone rang constantly. Reporters, talk show producers, people claiming to be documentary filmmakers. Everyone wanted her story. Everyone wanted to know what it was like to be the woman who found the missing billionaire. But the worst calls were the ones from people she hadn't heard from in years. Old friends who suddenly wanted to reconnect. Distant relatives who'd never bothered with her before, but now wondered if she might want to invest in their business ideas. Would you want to be known worldwide if it meant losing your peace? By evening, Riley sat in her apartment with the curtains drawn, watching news anchors speculate about her life on TV. They dug up her employment records, interviewed her high school teachers, even found photos from her social media accounts that she'd thought were private. Her entire existence had been turned inside out in less than 24 hours. All because she'd done what any decent person should do: help someone who needed it. She thought about Grant, probably dealing with his own media circus right now. The man who'd spent 3 years hiding from exactly this kind of attention. The man whose secret she'd accidentally blown wide open just by being a good human being. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "We need to talk. Meet me at the place where we first met. Come alone. Gee." Riley stared at the message, knowing that whatever came next would be even more complicated than what she was already dealing with. Grant stared at the message on his secure phone, his blood turning cold. The text had come from an encrypted number he recognized, one that belonged to someone he'd hoped never to hear from again. She ruined everything. The hermit act is over. Eliminate the problem, or we will. You have 48 hours. Marcus Webb, his former business partner, the man who tried to steal his company and have him declared incompetent. The man Grant thought he'd left behind when he disappeared from public life. Apparently, Webb had been watching, waiting, planning. And now Riley was in danger because she'd shown kindness to a stranger. Grant's hand shook as he forwarded the message to his head of security, then immediately called Riley. She answered on the first ring. "The media circus is insane," she said without preamble. "I can't even." "Riley, you need to listen to me very carefully. You're in danger." Silence on the other end of the line. "What kind of danger?" she asked, her voice suddenly tense. "The kind that comes from helping me. There are people who've been waiting for me to surface again, and now that I have—" "You're scaring me, Grant." "Good. You should be scared. Pack a bag. I'm sending a car to take you somewhere safe. I'm not running. This isn't a discussion. These people are dangerous. They see you as leverage against me, and they won't hesitate to hurt you to get what they want." "What do they want?" Grant closed his eyes. "My company. My money. My disappearance, permanently this time." Riley was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was steady and determined. "I didn't help you yesterday, so I could abandon you today when things get complicated." "Riley, you don't understand." "I understand perfectly. Someone wants to hurt you, and they think hurting me will get to you. But I'm not some helpless victim who needs to be hidden away. I can take care of myself. Not against these people. Marcus Webb has resources, connections, people who do whatever he pays them to do. He's been planning this for 3 years. Then we plan better." The simple confidence in her voice reminded Grant why he'd been drawn to her in the first place. In a world full of people who ran from conflict or tried to profit from it, Riley was someone who stood her ground and fought back. But that same strength that attracted him to her could also get her killed. "Riley, please. Just disappear for a while. Let me handle this." "No." "Why not?" "Because 3 years ago, everyone in your life let you down. They betrayed you, used you, abandoned you when things got tough. I'm not going to be another person who walks away when you need someone in your corner." Loyalty tested in danger reveals true character. Grant felt something shift in his chest, a warmth he hadn't experienced in years. Someone was willing to stand with him, not because of what he could give them, but because of who he was. "Okay," he said quietly, "but we do this my way, and you follow my lead on everything. Deal." "But Grant." "Yeah. This better not get me killed." Despite everything, Grant found himself smiling. "I'll do my best." Riley noticed the black sedan on her way to work. At first, she thought it was just another reporter trying to get photos. But when the same car appeared behind her at lunch, and again when she stopped at the hardware store after work, her stomach started to knot. Someone was following her. She took a longer route home, making random turns and unnecessary stops. The sedan stayed with her, always keeping exactly 3 cars back. Professional distance. Not amateur paparazzi. This was something else. By the time she reached her apartment building, Riley's hands were shaking. She parked and sat in her car for a moment, watching the sedan cruise past without stopping. The windows were too tinted to see inside, but she caught a glimpse of the license plate. Government issued. This was getting worse by the minute. Riley climbed the stairs to her 3rd-floor apartment, keys ready, checking over her shoulder every few steps. The hallway was empty, just like always. Her door was exactly as she'd left it. But when she unlocked it and stepped inside, she knew immediately that something was wrong. Nothing looked different. Nothing appeared to be missing. But there was a feeling in the air, the sense that someone else had been in her space. She found the envelope on her kitchen table. Plain white paper. No postmark, no return address. Just her name written in block letters across the front. Riley's hands trembled as she opened it. Inside was a single photograph, the same one that had been all over the news, showing her catching Grant's wheelchair. But this copy had been marked up with a red pen. A circle drawn around her face. An X drawn through Grant's. Below the photo, a message in the same block letters. He's not worth your life. Run. Riley sank into her kitchen chair, staring at the threat. Someone had been inside her home. Someone had touched her things, violated her space, left her a warning that felt less like advice and more like a promise. Her phone buzzed. A text from Grant. Everything okay? Haven't heard from you. Riley looked around her apartment, the place that had felt safe this morning but now felt like a trap. Should she tell him about the car, the photo, the message? Or would that just put him in more danger? If this note was left on your table, would you stay or run? She thought about packing a bag, getting in her car, and driving as far away from this situation as possible. It would be the smart thing to do, the safe thing. But then she remembered Grant's face when he told her about his business partner's betrayal. The pain in his voice when he described how everyone in his life had eventually let him down. Riley folded the photo and put it back in the envelope. Then she texted Grant back, I'm fine. But we need to meet. Tonight. She wasn't running. She'd meant what she said about not abandoning him when things got complicated, even if those complications might get her killed. Someone wanted to scare her away from Grant, which meant they were afraid of what she represented, someone who couldn't be bought, intimidated, or controlled. That just made her more determined to stay. Riley found Grant pacing his penthouse like a caged animal. You shouldn't have come here, he said the moment the elevator doors opened. It's not safe. Nowhere's safe anymore. Riley pulled the envelope from her jacket and tossed it on his coffee table. Someone was in my apartment today. Grant's face went white as he read the message and saw the marked-up photo. Webb's moving faster than I thought. We need to get you out of the city tonight. I already told you, I'm not running. Riley, this isn't a game. Marcus Webb has connections in places you can't imagine. Government contracts, military suppliers, people who make problems disappear permanently. Then tell me what we're really dealing with. Grant stopped pacing and looked at her with an expression she'd never seen before, fear mixed with something that looked almost like admiration. When I built my company, I developed software that could predict market crashes, election outcomes, even terrorist attacks. The government wanted exclusive access. When I refused to sell, Webb convinced me to license it instead. And now Webb controls the licenses, but I still own the core technology. If I die, it goes to charity. If I disappear permanently, he gets everything. But as long as I'm alive and visible, he can't touch it. Exactly. Your kindness yesterday didn't just save me from a broken wheelchair. It destroyed 3 years of his planning. Riley felt the weight of what she'd stumbled into settling on her shoulders. So what's his next move? Before Grant could answer, the lights in the penthouse flickered. Both of them froze. The lights flickered again, longer this time. Then the air conditioning stopped humming. The soft background noise of the building's systems went silent. "That's not normal," Riley whispered. Grant was already wheeling toward his security panel, but the screens were dark. The building's on backup power, but someone just cut the main lines. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, they watched the city beyond start to go dark. Street lights winked out in waves. Office buildings disappeared into blackness. The entire power grid was shutting down section by section. "This isn't possible," Grant said, but his voice was tight with fear. "You can't just turn off a city. Unless you have government connections and military suppliers," Riley said quietly. The penthouse emergency lighting kicked in, casting everything in an eerie red glow. Grant's phone buzzed with an alert, but when he checked it, there was no signal. "Cell towers are down too," he said. Riley moved to the windows. Far below, she could see cars stopped in the streets, their headlights creating rivers of light in the darkness. But there was something else, vehicles moving with purpose through the chaos. Black sedans like the one that had followed her, converging on their building. "Grant," she said softly. "Look." He joined her at the windows. Together, they watched the vehicles surrounding their building like a military operation. No sirens, no flashing lights. Just methodical, professional deployment. Webb doesn't just want your technology, Riley realized. He wants to send a message. Show everyone what happens when someone crosses him. The building's emergency power flickered once, then died completely. They were plunged into absolute darkness except for the city lights in the distance, the parts of the city that hadn't been affected by whatever Webb had done to the power grid. In the darkness, Grant's voice was barely a whisper. "They're here." Riley felt for his hand in the dark and squeezed it. Whatever came next, they would face it together. If this happened tonight in your city, wouldn't you want to know first? Subscribe before the next twist leaves you in the dark. Outside, they could hear the sound of vehicles pulling up to the building. Doors slamming. Footsteps in the alley below. The hunt had begun. 3 days into their new reality, Riley learned what it meant to live like prey. She and Grant had left the penthouse before dawn, using service tunnels Grant had installed during his years of paranoia. They moved through the city like ghosts, staying in safe houses, changing locations every few hours, never using the same route twice. But Webb's people were everywhere. Black sedans at intersections. Men in suits lingering outside coffee shops. Surveillance drones that looked like delivery vehicles, but hovered too long in one spot. Riley had never noticed how many ways someone could watch you until she became the one being watched. "This is insane," she whispered to Grant as they sat in the back of a diner at 2 a.m., both wearing baseball caps pulled low. "How do you live like this?" "You adapt," Grant said, cutting his pancakes with mechanical precision. "You learn to see patterns. Notice when the same face appears twice in different places. Trust your instincts when something feels wrong." Riley was learning fast. The businessman reading a newspaper at the counter? He'd been at the gas station where they'd stopped an hour ago. The woman texting by the window? She'd been walking behind them 3 blocks back. They were surrounded. "We need to move," Grant said quietly. They paid cash and slipped out the back exit into an alley. Grant's wheelchair moved silently on specially designed bearings, another modification from his years in hiding. Riley had her keys ready, their next safe house mapped out in her mind. That's when she saw the red laser dancing across the brick wall next to her head. "Down!" she shouted, grabbing Grant's wheelchair and pulling him behind a dumpster, just as footsteps echoed from both ends of the alley. They were trapped. Riley's heart hammered as she pressed herself against the cold metal. listening to the measured footsteps getting closer. These weren't street dogs or random criminals. These were professionals, and they were closing in from both directions. What would you do if someone was always watching you? "There's a storm drain," Grant whispered, pointing to a grate near the building's foundation. "I scouted escape routes from every location. You can't fit through that in your chair." "I can if you help me." Riley looked at the narrow opening, then at Grant's face. He was asking her to trust him completely, to believe that his years of preparation would keep them both alive. The footsteps were getting closer. Riley grabbed the grate and pulled. It lifted easier than expected. Grant had obviously prepared this route. She helped him out of his wheelchair and supported his weight as they squeezed through the opening into the tunnel below. Above them, she heard voices. Where did they go? Check the rooftops. They couldn't have just vanished. In the darkness of the storm drain, Riley and Grant crawled through ankle-deep water, moving toward a distant circle of light that marked another exit. Riley's knees scraped against concrete. Her clothes were soaked with city runoff. But they were alive. "How many of these escape routes do you have?" she whispered. "Enough," Grant replied. "I spent 3 years preparing for this day. I just never thought I'd have someone with me when it happened." They emerged 6 blocks away, filthy but free. For now. But as they caught their breath in another alley, Riley realized the terrible truth. This wasn't just a chase anymore. This was war. In a 24-hour laundromat that smelled like detergent and broken dreams, Grant finally told Riley the whole truth. Webb wasn't working alone, he said, feeding quarters into a washing machine to clean their clothes from the storm drain escape. Half my board of directors were in on it. Riley sat in a plastic chair, exhausted and overwhelmed. "Your own board tried to steal your company. They thought I was weak, naive, a disabled idealist who didn't understand how real business worked." Grant's voice turned bitter. "They were probably right about the naive part. What happened?" "While I was building software to help people, predicting natural disasters, preventing market crashes, identifying terrorist threats before they happened, they were making deals behind my back, selling access to the highest bidders, turning my technology into a weapon." Riley watched their clothes tumble in the machine and tried to process what she was hearing. "So when you disappeared, I thought the corruption would die with my absence. I was wrong. They just got bolder. Webb convinced the board that I was mentally unstable, that my disability made me unfit to run the company. They voted to declare me dead and divide up my assets. But you're not dead. No. And my sudden reappearance threatens billions of dollars in illegal deals they've made over the past 3 years. Government contracts, military sales, private intelligence operations, all using technology one created to help people." Riley felt sick. "So they want you actually dead this time." "It's not personal," Grant said with dark humor. "It's just business. Dead billionaires don't sue for theft of intellectual property. How many people are we talking about? At least 6 board members, plus their various connections in government and military contracting. Webb has turned my company into a criminal enterprise, and they can't let me expose them." Riley stared at him. "Grant, we're not running from a jealous business partner. We're running from an entire conspiracy. Now you're starting to understand why I told you to run." But instead of fear, Riley felt something else building in her chest. Anger. These people had stolen Grant's life's work and turned it into something evil. They'd driven him into hiding for 3 years. And now they were trying to kill him to cover up their crimes. True loyalty cannot be bought, it must be earned. "So what's the plan?" she asked. Grant looked at her with surprise. "The plan is to keep you alive. I never expected you to stay this long." "Well, I'm staying. So we need a better plan than just running forever." "Riley, you don't understand what you're up against." "Then help me understand. Because I'm not letting them win." For the first time since the chase began, Grant smiled. "Okay, but first we need allies. and I think I know where to find them. The message came through an encrypted app Grant had thought was dead for 3 years. Still alive, boss. Meet me where we used to grab coffee. Come alone. Phoenix. Who's Phoenix? Riley asked, reading over Grant's shoulder in their latest safe house, a motel room that rented by the hour and didn't ask questions. Zoe Martinez. My former head of cybersecurity. I thought Webb had fired her years ago. And now she's reaching out? Grant stared at the message, his expression unreadable. Either she's been working against Webb this whole time, or this is a trap. Only one way to find out. Riley, if this goes bad. It won't. But an hour later, sitting in a 24-hour diner across from a woman with purple hair and forearms covered in tattoos, Riley wasn't so sure. Zoe Martinez looked like she hadn't slept in weeks. Dark circles under her eyes, hands that shook slightly when she lifted her coffee cup. But when she looked at Grant, her expression was pure relief. I thought they'd killed you, she said quietly. They tried. What's been happening inside the company? Hell. Pure hell. Zoe glanced around nervously before continuing. Webb's been selling your predictive algorithms to the highest bidders. Dictatorships, terrorist organizations, criminal syndicates, anyone with enough money. Riley felt her stomach drop. The software that was supposed to prevent attacks is now being used to plan them, Zoe finished. Your hurricane prediction system? It's helping drug cartels know when to move shipments. Your market analysis? It's being used to manipulate elections in 12 countries. Grant's face had gone completely white. How many people have died because of this? I don't know. I've been trying to sabotage what I can from the inside, but Webb's got me watched constantly. The only reason I could reach out is because he thinks I'm meeting a contact about you. Who can you trust when everyone has an agenda? What contact? Riley asked. Zoe's expression darkened. Someone's been feeding him information about your locations. Someone close to you. Grant and Riley looked at each other. They'd been so careful, so paranoid about external threats. But what if the danger was coming from inside their own circle? Who else knows about your safe houses? Zoe asked. Grant's face went from white to gray. Only one person. Riley felt the world tilt. Who? My head of security. The man I've trusted with my life for 5 years. The betrayal was coming from inside their own team. Riley's phone buzzed with a text from Tom Harrison, Grant's head of security, and the man who'd been coordinating their safe houses. Location compromised. New safe house ready. Address attached. Come immediately. TH. She showed the message to Grant and Zoe. Both of them stared at it like it was a bomb. He's the leak, Zoe said quietly. Has to be. Webb's people have hit every location he's set up for you. Tom's been with me for 5 years, Grant said, but his voice lacked conviction. He saved my life twice. For money, Riley said, the pieces clicking together. Think about it. Who else would know your exact movements? Who else could track your emergency protocols? Grant's face crumpled. I trusted him completely. After Webb betrayed me, Tom was the one person I thought would never. Riley watched the man she'd come to care about deal with another devastating betrayal. First his business partner, then his board of directors, now his own security chief. Everyone Grant had trusted had eventually sold him out. We can use this, Zoe said, her cybersecurity mind already working. He doesn't know we know he's the leak. How? We feed him false information. Make him think you're going to one location while you're really somewhere else. When Webb's people show up at the wrong place, we'll have proof, Riley finished. But Grant was shaking his head. You don't understand. Tom knows everything. My backup accounts, my escape routes, my emergency contacts. If he's been working with Webb, then we're completely exposed, Riley realized. Her phone buzzed again. Another text from Tom. Urgent. Webb's people closing in on current location. Must move now. He's pushing, Zoe observed. That's desperation. Webb probably promised him a huge payout if he delivers you tonight. Riley looked at Grant. 3 days ago, she'd been a simple mechanic who fixed broken things. Now she was part of a conspiracy involving billions of dollars, corrupt board members, and government contracts. And the one person they'd been trusting to keep them safe was actively trying to get them killed. Courage sometimes means standing firm even when betrayed. So what do we do? Riley asked. We give Tom exactly what he wants, Grant said, his voice suddenly hard with determination. We go to his safe house. That's suicide. No, that's how we end this. We walk into his trap, but we bring our own surprise. Riley stared at him. What kind of surprise? Grant's smile was cold and calculating, the expression of a man who'd built a billion-dollar empire and wasn't going down without a fight. The kind that reminds people why they were afraid of me in the first place. The video went viral at 3:47 a.m. Someone had been recording from a different angle during the wheelchair incident, capturing not just Riley's rescue, but also the conversation afterward. The audio was crystal clear, including Grant's admission about his real identity and Riley's shock reaction. By sunrise, #GrantHallowayAlive was trending worldwide. Riley woke up to her phone buzzing nonstop with notifications. News outlets, social media influencers, and random strangers were all sharing the same 90-second clip that had turned her life upside down again. The headlines were brutal. Mystery woman knew billionaire's secret. Did she help him hide for 3 years? Romance or conspiracy? But the comments were worse. Thousands of people speculating about her motives, her background, her relationship with Grant. Some called her a gold digger. Others insisted she was part of some elaborate scheme. A few even suggested she'd staged the whole wheelchair incident for attention. This is a nightmare, Riley said, scrolling through the endless stream of accusations and theories. Grant looked pale as he read the coverage on his laptop. They're painting you as either a victim or a villain. There's no middle ground where you're just a person who helps someone. Look at this one, Riley said, showing him her phone. Someone posted my high school yearbook photo with the caption, "From nobody to billionaire's girlfriend in one wheelchair fix." The invasion of privacy was suffocating. Reporters had found her childhood home, interviewed her elementary school teachers, and somehow gotten hold of her tax returns from the past 5 years. Every detail of her ordinary life was being analyzed for clues about some grand conspiracy that didn't exist. How would you handle being dragged into the spotlight unwillingly? But the worst part wasn't the media circus. It was the danger it created. Every news report included their photos, their names, details about where they'd been seen. They were no longer hiding in the shadows. They were front-page news with targets painted on their backs. Webb must be loving this, Grant said grimly. He doesn't have to hunt us down anymore. The whole world is doing it for him. Riley's phone rang. Unknown number, but the caller ID showed it was from a major network. Ms. Chun, this is Patricia Williams from Channel 7 News. We'd like to offer you exclusive interview rights to tell your side of the story. We're prepared to offer substantial compensation. Riley hung up. The phone rang again immediately. Different network, same offer. They want to buy my story, she said. Everyone does. There are probably a dozen production companies scrambling to get the movie rights. Riley felt sick. Her simple act of kindness had become a commodity. People were already profiting from her decision to help stranger, turning it into entertainment and speculation. Grant, I'm scared. Of Webb. Of this, she gestured at the phones, the laptops, the constant stream of attention. I never wanted to be famous. I just wanted to fix your wheelchair and go home. Grant wheeled over and took her hand. I know. And I'm sorry. This is exactly why I disappeared in the first place. Outside their motel room, they could hear cars pulling up, car doors slamming, voices calling their names. The media had found them. The motel room door exploded inward at 2 a.m. Riley woke to the sound of splintering wood and heavy boots on cheap carpet. In the darkness, she could see shapes moving. 3, maybe 4 men in tactical gear. "Grant," she whispered, but he was already awake, transferring from the bed to his wheelchair with practiced speed. "Back window," he said quietly. "Now." But the men had night vision goggles. One of them spotted Riley moving and raised what looked like a tranquilizer gun. Riley didn't think. She grabbed the bedside lamp and hurled it at the closest intruder, hitting him square in the face. He went down hard, his equipment scattering across the floor. "Go, go, go," she shouted, helping Grant navigate toward the bathroom where they'd already planned their escape route. The window was small, but Grant had insisted on ground floor rooms for exactly this reason. Riley kicked out the screen and helped him through first, then squeezed out after him just as hands grabbed for her ankles. They were in the parking lot behind the motel, exposed under security lights. Grant's wheelchair moved silently across the asphalt while Riley ran alongside him, her heart hammering. "The car's too far," Grant said, looking toward their rental parked at the far end of the lot. "This way," Riley said, spotting a drainage ditch that ran along the property line. It wasn't ideal, but it was cover. They slid down into the concrete channel, just as floodlights lit up the parking lot behind them. Shouts echoed from the motel room. Someone was coordinating a search. "How did they find us so fast?" Riley whispered as they moved through the ditch, staying below the sight line. "Tom," Grant said grimly. "He's not just giving them our locations. He's giving them our habits, our escape routes." Bravery is not the absence of fear, but action despite it. Riley's fear was so intense she could taste metal in her mouth, but she kept moving. Grant needed her to be strong, to think clearly, to not fall apart when everything went wrong. They reached a storm drain outlet that connected to the city's underground system. It was their best chance of disappearing completely. "I hate that I'm getting good at this," Riley muttered, helping Grant navigate into the tunnel. "You saved my life back there," Grant said as they moved through ankle-deep water toward a distant exit. "That lamp throw was perfect. I played softball in high school. Remind me to thank your coach." They emerged 6 blocks away, filthy and exhausted, but alive. Riley's hands were shaking with leftover adrenaline, and Grant looked like he'd aged 10 years in the past hour. "We can't keep running forever," Riley said. "I know. So what's the endgame?" Grant stared back toward the motel, where they could still see flashing lights and hear sirens. Webb's people were getting bolder, more desperate, which meant they were running out of time to solve this peacefully. "We stop running," Grant said quietly. "We make them come to us. On our terms." "How?" Grant's expression was grim but determined. "We give them exactly what they want. A public confrontation they can't walk away from." The emergency board meeting was Grant's idea. "They think I'm weak, broken, hiding in shadows," he told Riley as they prepared for what could be their final gambit. Time to remind them who they're dealing with. Grant had used his remaining corporate authority to call an emergency shareholders meeting. Legally, the board had to attend. And thanks to Zoe's inside information, they knew Webb would be there too. The corporate conference room on the 40th floor looked exactly the same as it had 3 years ago when Grant had last sat at that table. Same leather chairs, same mahogany table, same floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. But the people around the table had changed. Marcus Webb sat in Grant's old chair, the head of a table, where he clearly thought he belonged. The board members who'd voted to declare Grant mentally incompetent looked nervous as Grant rolled into the room. They'd probably hoped never to see him again. "Gentlemen," Grant said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd built this company from nothing. "I believe we have some things to discuss." Webb leaned back in the stolen chair, trying to project confidence he clearly didn't feel. "Grant, you look different. 3 years in hiding will do that to a man. 3 years watching you destroy everything I built will do that too. I saved this company. You were having a breakdown, making irrational decisions. I was trying to keep my technology from being sold to terrorists and dictatorships. Grant's voice cut through the room like a blade. Which you've been doing for profit while I was gone. The board members shifted uncomfortably. These were powerful people who'd grown used to operating without oversight, making deals that would have horrified Grant but made them rich. Riley stood in the corner, watching Grant reclaim his power with quiet pride. This wasn't the broken man she'd met in the plaza. This was the billionaire who'd revolutionized 3 industries before age 30. You have no proof of any wrongdoing, Webb said. Don't I? Grant nodded to Zoe, who'd been waiting outside. She entered with a stack of documents and a laptop. Financial records, communication logs, and client lists, Zoe announced, placing the evidence on the table. 3 years of illegal weapon sales, election manipulation, and terrorist financing, all using Grant's predictive algorithms. Would you forgive someone who once tried to destroy you? Webb's face went white. The board members looked like they wanted to run. The question isn't whether I can prove what you've done, Grant said quietly. The question is whether you want this to go public or if we can handle it privately. What do you want? Webb asked. Everything, Grant replied. My company back, your resignations, and full cooperation with the federal investigation that's already underway. The room fell silent except for the sound of Webb's world collapsing. The press conference was scheduled for noon. Grant had insisted on making everything public: the corruption, the stolen technology, the 3 years of illegal arms dealing that had happened in his absence. It was the only way to end Webb's threats permanently. But as Riley stood backstage at the convention center, watching reporters fill the auditorium, she knew they were walking into a trap. Too many variables, she told Grant. Too many things that could go wrong. That's why it'll work. Webb expects us to keep hiding. He's not prepared for a frontal assault. Riley wasn't so sure. The past week had shown her that Webb had resources she couldn't even imagine. Government connections, military contractors, people who made problems disappear. Walking onto a stage in front of hundreds of cameras felt like volunteering for execution. 5 minutes, a production assistant called out. Grant straightened his tie and checked his notes one last time. The evidence was overwhelming: financial records, recorded phone calls, client lists that read like a who's who of international criminals. Webb's empire was about to crumble in front of the world. You don't have to do this, Grant told Riley. You can stay backstage. We're in this together, remember? But as they moved toward the stage entrance, Riley noticed something that made her blood run cold. Zoe was talking quietly on her phone in the corner, her back turned to them. The conversation looked tense, urgent. Grant, Riley whispered, but he was already being introduced to the crowd. They walked onto the stage together, Grant in his wheelchair, Riley beside him, facing a sea of cameras and reporters. The questions started immediately. Mr. Holloway, where have you been for 3 years? Is it true your own board tried to have you declared dead? Ms. Chun, how long have you been hiding the truth about his identity? Grant raised his hand for silence. I'll answer all your questions. But first, I need to address the corruption that's been happening in my absence. He began outlining Webb's crimes, showing documents on the screen behind them. The audience was riveted. This was the story of the decade. A missing billionaire returning to expose a massive conspiracy. But Riley kept watching Zoe, who was now moving toward the side of the stage. Something was wrong. That's when she saw the man in the lighting booth. He wasn't wearing the same shirt as the other technicians. His movements were too precise, too military. And he was adjusting something that definitely wasn't a light. Grant, Riley said urgently. We need to go. Now. What? Riley didn't explain. She grabbed his wheelchair and started moving toward the exit, just as chaos erupted in the auditorium. The lights went out. Emergency alarms started blaring. In the darkness, she could hear running footsteps, shouting, the sound of something heavy hitting the floor where the stage had been. This way, Zoe's voice called out in the darkness. I know another exit. But Riley's instincts screamed danger. Zoe had been on her phone right before the attack. Zoe knew exactly where to find them in the dark. Sharp plot twist hinted. One of their allies may not be trustworthy after all. Not that way, Riley told Grant, pulling his wheelchair in the opposite direction. Because she was starting to realize that Webb's most effective weapon wasn't the man in the lighting booth. It was the woman they'd trusted to save them. In the darkness of the convention center's backstage area, Riley made a split-second decision that would save both their lives. Instead of following Zoe toward what she claimed was an exit, Riley pulled Grant's wheelchair behind a stack of equipment cases and pressed her finger to her lips for silence. "Riley, what are you doing?" Zoe's voice called out in the dark. "This way. I can get you out safely." But Riley had noticed something crucial in those final moments before the lights went out. Zoe hadn't looked surprised when the chaos started. She'd been checking her phone, timing something, positioning herself perfectly to rescue them. "She's not trying to save us," Riley whispered to Grant. "She's hurting us." Through the darkness, they could hear Zoe moving around, calling their names with increasing desperation. But Riley kept them hidden, waiting. That's when they heard the second voice. "They're not here," Tom Harrison said, emerging from the shadows. Grant's former head of security, the man who'd been feeding their locations to Webb. "Your girlfriend said they'd be by the exit." "She's not my girlfriend, you idiot," Zoe snapped. "And they were just here. They have to be somewhere." Riley felt Grant tense beside her. The betrayal was deeper than they'd thought. Not just Tom selling them out, but Zoe playing both sides from the beginning. "Webb's getting impatient," Tom said. "He wants this finished tonight. Then we finish it. But I need them alive long enough to transfer the technology patents. Dead billionaires can't sign documents." Riley's blood ran cold. This wasn't just about silencing Grant. They wanted to steal his life's work completely. That's when Grant did something that surprised everyone, including Riley. He started laughing. Not quietly, not trying to hide. A full, genuine laugh that echoed through the backstage area. "Grant, what are you doing?" Riley hissed. But Grant was already rolling out from behind their hiding spot, his phone in his hand with the flashlight on. "Zoe, Tom, there you are," he said cheerfully. "Looking for us?" Both conspirators spun around, caught completely off guard. Tom reached for his weapon, but Grant held up his phone. "I wouldn't do that if I were you. Say hello to the FBI." On Grant's phone screen, Riley could see a video call in progress. Agent Patricia Martinez was watching everything through Grant's camera, and behind her were a dozen federal agents. "Everything you just said was recorded and transmitted live to federal law enforcement," Grant continued. "Zoe's admission about the patent theft, Tom's confession about working with Webb, all of it." Zoe's face went white. "That's impossible. We cut all communications." "You cut the building's main systems. But I've been using a satellite uplink this entire time. One of the benefits of owning a tech company. You learn to build redundant communication systems." Riley stared at Grant in amazement. He'd been 3 steps ahead of everyone, including her. "The press conference was never about exposing Webb publicly," Grant explained. "It was about getting all of you in one place where the FBI could collect evidence of your conspiracy. Every threat, every illegal order, every admission of guilt, all recorded." Through the building, they could hear heavy footsteps. Federal agents were already moving in. "Webb will never," Tom started to say. "Webb's already in custody," Grant interrupted. "Has been for the past hour. Turns out when you try to assassinate a federal witness at a press conference, the government takes it personally. Compassion and intelligence can conquer power and deception." Riley watched the woman who'd pretended to help them, who'd earned their trust and nearly gotten them killed, realize that her entire plan had backfired. "How long have you known?" Zoe asked quietly. "About you?" "Since yesterday." "About Tom?" "Since the night he sent us to that safe house that Webb's people hit within an hour." Grant's voice was calm, almost gentle. "But I needed proof." And I needed to protect Riley. Riley felt something shift in her chest. Grant hadn't just been playing chess with his enemies. He'd been protecting her the entire time. The question now, Grant continued as federal agents flooded the backstage area, is whether you want to cooperate with the investigation or spend the next 20 years in federal prison. As Tom and Zoe were led away in handcuffs, Riley realized she'd just witnessed something remarkable. Grant hadn't won through violence or intimidation. He'd won through intelligence, patience, and careful planning. And somehow, her simple act of kindness in a plaza had been the catalyst that brought down an entire criminal empire. 3 weeks later, Riley and Grant sat on the roof garden of his penthouse, watching the city lights sparkle below them. The trials were scheduled to begin in 6 months. Webb, Tom, Zoe, and 4 board members were facing federal charges ranging from conspiracy to arms trafficking. The story had dominated headlines for weeks. The missing billionaire who'd returned to expose massive corruption, aided by the mechanic who'd simply wanted to help a stranger. "Do you ever regret it?" Grant asked, handing Riley a cup of coffee. "Helping me that day?" Riley considered the question. Her life had been completely upended. She'd been shot at, chased through stormed rains, betrayed by people she trusted, and thrust into a media circus that still hadn't completely died down. "No," she said finally. "I regret that helping someone turned into all this chaos. But I don't regret helping you, even though it nearly got you killed. Especially because of that." Riley looked at him. "You were right about one thing. I learned who I really am when everything went wrong. Turns out I'm someone who doesn't run when things get complicated." Grant smiled. "That's what I figured out about you pretty early on." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the city below. Riley's apartment had been declared safe weeks ago, but she'd been spending most of her time here. Not because of Grant's wealth or the luxury, but because after everything they'd been through together, being apart felt wrong. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we rebuild. The company, my reputation, some kind of normal life." Grant paused. "If you want to be part of that." Riley felt her heart skip. "What are you asking exactly?" "I'm asking if you want to stay. Not as my rescuer or my protector or the woman who helped me when I needed it. Just as you. Riley Chun, who fixes broken things." She looked at him, really looked. The fear was gone from his eyes. The paranoia and isolation that had defined his life for 3 years had been replaced by something she'd never seen in him before. Hope. "I fix broken things," she said. "And you're not broken anymore. Maybe that's why I need you to stay. To make sure I don't break again." Riley was about to answer when something caught her eye. A figure standing on the roof of the building across the street. Too far away to make out clearly, but definitely watching them. "Grant," she said quietly. "Look across the street. Top of the building with the red sign." Grant followed her gaze. The figure was still there, motionless, clearly observing them through what might have been binoculars. "Probably just a reporter," Grant said, but Riley could hear the tension creeping back into his voice. They watched for several minutes. The figure never moved, never stopped watching them. "Webb's in federal prison," Riley said. "Tom and Zoe are awaiting trial. Who else would be watching us?" "I don't know." Riley felt the familiar chill of being hunted. Just when they'd thought the danger was over, when they'd begun to believe they could have something approaching a normal life, a reminder that powerful people had long memories and patient vengeances. "Should we call Agent Martinez?" Riley asked. "Tomorrow. Tonight, let's just pretend we're safe." But as they headed inside, Riley couldn't shake the feeling that their story was far from over. Webb had been the visible enemy, the obvious threat. But what if he'd just been the tip of the iceberg? As they closed the rooftop door behind them, the figure across the street finally moved, disappearing into the shadows. The story might be over, or just beginning. What do you think will happen next? Comment below and subscribe before the next twist. In the city that never sleeps, some secrets never rest.